Oh, thanks so much, Ben. Thanks everybody for being here. Welcome to a bit of a rainy, windy Sydney, but really appreciate you taking the time to come to today's lunch and the work that you do in the community. Can I all acknowledge my colleague, Tara Moriarty, Dave Lazell, Helen, as well as good mate of mine, Mick, and I understand Nicole and Scott Barrett are here too, so welcome to all my parliamentary colleagues. And can I thank the farm riders for inviting me today? I know this is going to be a busy month as we head into the federal election. There's a million things to cover. Hopefully, Dave, we can take a couple of months off just while they battle it out federally. Head off to Fiji or something together. Okay. Maybe not together. But anyway... Look, I want to thank the farm riders for inviting me today. Back in the late 60s, I understand that Gough Whitlam was invited to speak to the Farm Riders Association on 3 separate occasions and 3 times sent his apologies. Said he was too busy to come. And given that that was 60 years ago and the farm riders haven't forgotten about it, I thought, I'm not going to make the same mistake. And I was very pleased to come, very pleased to get the invitation, and it's a real thrill to be here. I wanted to come to talk about some of the things that you're covering in regional New South Wales, to answer some of the questions that you might have, to get an understanding so that the government, my government, is responsive to the challenges in regional New South Wales, but also the incredible opportunities. As riders, you're telling the story of rural Australia. You're continuing one of the oldest traditions in the country. And when you consider our history, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that the riders in this room, in fact, rural riders, help mould Australia's national identity. If you go back to the 19th century, in the years before and after Federation, we had Banjo Patterson, Henry Lawson, Miles Franklin, all of them proudly from New South Wales, all reflecting the rural experience. All of them were working journalists. They had their differences. Patterson was a romantic, Lawson was a realist. Patterson was more conservative, Lawson was more of a radical. But as a collective, they helped take a country that was raw and in part unformed, a country that was still discovering itself, and gave us a sense of national cohesion, in a sense, writing the first draft of history. Obviously, the country's changed a lot since then, but if you travel around the state, you still have that and find that ethos of self-sufficiency, mateship, optimism, hope about the future. And we need to keep telling these stories. These are Australian stories. The truth is, newspapers from the city will never be able to cover them with the same knowledge, the same sense of history, the same sense of community, the sensitivity to local people, the real appreciation and craft of grabbing a local story from a local identity and lifting it up and putting it to the forefront. In short, we need you. We need the regional press to hold people like me to account, to cover one of the most significant industries in Australia. Economies do evolve, and the economy of Banjo Patterson's time is very different to the one we have today, but farming will always be a bedrock industry of this state. Last year, it was worth more than $20 billion. That's our 3rd biggest year on year, beaten only by the year before that, which was beaten by the year before that. Agriculture feeds us. It employs hundreds of thousands of people. It drives export income, more than $11 billion last year. And last year I asked my officials what $20 billion of agricultural output looked like, and they told me it was 10 million tonnes of wheat, 990 million litres of milk, 6 million head of beef cattle, 26 million head of sheep shorn, and the largest wool-growing state in Australia. 60% of Australia's oranges, 80% of our blueberries. By any measure, it's an economic powerhouse. And the outlook for the next year is positive too, with the winter crop production up and international demand for our produce high. And it tells me that conditions are good, or even just reasonable. If conditions are good or even just reasonable, farmers in New South Wales will succeed and prosper and expand their markets. And that's good news for Australia. Rural communities are proud places. And in my experience, relatively brief as the Premier of New South Wales, I can say unambiguously, no one is looking for a handout. No one. They're looking for a leg up, and maybe the New South Wales government getting out of their way so they can meet their full potential. Of course, there's always going to be ways the New South Wales government can help, whether it's R&D centres, internet connectivity for farmers in the central west and southern New South Wales, ensuring that critical infrastructure, roads in particular, are connected to regional communities to make that access from the bush, from the farm to the port and export markets is as seamless as possible. But the primary role for government here is to step in when there's large issues that can't be solved by individual farmers or even collections of farmers. Big issues like trade and biosecurity, as well as land use policy that need coordination between governments and people on the land. Now, I'm sure you've all been following what's been happening in the United States, particularly concerning reports around changes to tariffs and trade barriers over the last few months. Historically, New South Wales has been at the heartland of free trade politics in Australia. This has been the epicentre of ensuring that we have low barriers to entry, low tariffs, low quotas or no quotas, effectively saying both to other jurisdictions in Australia but also to other markets around the world that we're prepared to stand on our own 2 feet. We don't need help. We don't need help from the federal government or the state government. We are prepared to compete with other markets on a like-for-like basis. It's been basically the bedrock of the agricultural industry in the state. And we always need to campaign for a world of free and open, mutually beneficial trade. It's good for our primary producers, but it's also good for consumers who are fortunate enough to buy our products and produce. Australia doesn't place tariffs on the United States, and in return, we quite rightly should send an unambiguous message from the political leaders across the spectrum in Australia that we rightly expect no tariffs on our goods too. With very few exceptions, tariffs are a recipe for lower growth, higher inflation, but perhaps more importantly, missed opportunities. Young people on the land who might be entrepreneurial, who can spot an opportunity or a marketplace that no one else has jumped into yet. Tariffs spoil that opportunity. And the truth is, that idea of a connected world with low tariffs is under a sustained attack. And I think it's on all of us to keep making the case both publicly and privately, both in Australia and when we travel around the world, that we are open for business, that we support commerce, that we want open trade. That's certainly what the New South Wales government's doing in every forum available to us. Now, I understand the Commonwealth government, as well as whoever wins the next federal election, has got a complicated task dealing with the United States. And it's unclear what the next step will be from the Trump administration. But in a sense, we have to send a message that goes beyond the next 4 years of this administration to whoever wins the presidency after that Australia wants and expects, as a good friend of the United States, low barriers of entry and trade, not just in Australia, but around the world. A second area where we need coordination from the top is biosecurity. This is something we've heard from farmers for a long time, and it is a priority for us. As the New South Wales Farmers Federation have said, invasive species are like a slow-moving bushfire. And when there is a bushfire, we all need to get out there to help. We need to have the same attitude when it comes to weeds if we're going to have any chance of getting them under control. And we have taken that to heart, and I know Tara has in particular, and we're rolling out almost $1 billion worth of programs, a lot of them smallish and quite discreet and geographically located, but necessary nonetheless. Their job is to identify, control and destroy the pests and the weeds that are threatening businesses. When we came to office, there was $15 million on the table to deal with fire ants coming over from Queensland. But with the threats of fire ants, we listened to the sector and we listened to the farmers, New South Wales farmers. And we put in $95 million, tipping more than any other state to combat that real threat to our agricultural industry. In the same spirit, we're spending $26 million to combat feral pigs with the biggest feral pig program anywhere in the country. I'm proud to say in the last 18 months, we've taken out 170,000 pigs, more than the original target. It's incredible. I hope there's not pork on the menu today, but... And we put the same attention on avian flu when it materialised, which was an incursion into the state. Now, obviously, I want to leave time for questions, but the big final picture item for us and something that we need to work on is the new work of the Agriculture Commissioner. We made this an election commitment because of the competing demands, on the land that have been growing in recent years. On the one hand, we've got agricultural demands, but we've also got a wave of people moving from the cities to regional areas who want housing and need that infrastructure. We've got energy infrastructure, which is a complete change, a complete sea change into the traditional way that energy was produced and distributed in New South Wales for generations. To cut a long story short, one of my predecessors, Neville Wran, made the clever decision of putting coal-fired power stations on top of coal mines. So the travel costs, the logistic costs were zero. And as a result, it funded and pushed through a generation of manufacturing, particularly in the Hunter and south of Wollongong. Well, that's changing, and it's changing rapidly. We made a decision when we were elected to office. It copped a lot of criticism, particularly from my own party, but to keep Eraring Power Station open for longer so we could manage the energy transition. But it's still a massive, massive challenge for the state. And one of the reasons we want to have an agriculture commissioner, as well as the New South Wales government listening, is so that we can manage those land use issues and ensure that we've got enough power to keep the lights on in the country and in the city. It's why we hired Alison Stone in November to navigate these demands. They can get charged and passionate, and we want someone with a level head who can come to the government with the latest information and get a good outcome for everybody. Friends, I know that there are some sizable plans for this industry to reach $30 billion by 2030, and it's a big dream, but I think it's also important to dream big in these emerging export-led industries, because here in New South Wales, our economy is, and a lot of people don't know this, but our largest export item last year, the year before that, and the year before that was coal. Now, we've got markets for coal that will continue, and the buyers of that coal will continue to buy it in the years ahead, but every single one of the countries that are purchasing coal from New South Wales have indicated to us in the years ahead they'll purchase less of it. And to have a 30, 40 or $50 billion export hole in our economy in the future means that we need industries that are the size of 30, 40 and $50 billion, that are looking for new markets around the world so that we can maintain our standard of living, so that we can exploit new opportunities for the state, and we can think about the future. Australia's always been good at that. When there has been challenges for our largest export items, we've had enough ingenuity and capital and resourcefulness to think about what comes next. And I'm saying to this room, and a big challenge to my government as well, we do need to think about what comes next, because we can't just have all our eggs in the one basket. And any economy anywhere in the world where its largest export item is under so much pressure has to be thinking about tomorrow. So we need to fill that hole, and agriculture is one of the ways that we will do it. That's not just on equity grounds. It's not just because it's vital for our regional communities, but it is proving to be a necessary part of a more complex, vibrant economy that is export-led. There is no strong New South Wales without a strong farming sector. And it's our job to make sure that's the case today and in the future. And it's my job to try and convince you that that's exactly what my government's doing. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you for that, Premier. It's certainly been a big day for politics with the federal election being announced, but we live and breathe agriculture in this room right now. And what we want to do is get to the heart of the issues in New South Wales. You've touched on the fact that, it's a $20 billion industry. It's an economic powerhouse. We've talked about some of the things that your government's doing in regards to that to reach that $30 billion by 2030. What investment is needed, and what's your future commitment to the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development?
Yeah, that's a good question. A few things I'd say. Firstly, there's some practical things that we can do to push to help with the sector, particularly innovation. And I know Tara and the Cabinet have put $60 million into R&D. We're trying to spread that out across regional communities. I think there's a centre in Orange, Narrandera, Tamworth, Grafton. Am I missing any? A few more. And of course, Elizabeth MacArthur's a really important research centre for the state. We're prepared to put more into it. We think that innovation in the agricultural sector isn't just something that can benefit goods to be shipped around the world, but we could be a world leader when it comes to technology and innovation in that space. And Helen's told me a million times that, and it's the truth, that New South Wales, particularly that Riverina sector, has been a world leader when it comes to water technology. And I'd like to see some of that tech available to communities around the world, and Australia lead with the IP on that technology. So this is a good opportunity for the state, not just in your traditional agricultural sectors. That's one area. Secondly, I've spoken about biosecurity. I've spoken about the industry. The truth of the matter is there's enough entrepreneurship and innovation in this room in the private agricultural market that it doesn't need to be government-led. It will be led by the people in this room taking opportunities, and people in regional communities taking opportunities in markets that spring up. We could stop it though, and sometimes the best thing for the New South Wales government to do is to release red tape, some of the real barriers to economic growth in regional communities. So I'm really focused on that. We're doing that when it comes to housing in Sydney at the moment, but there's opportunities in the bush as well. And the last thing I'd say is I really believe that we need help pushing Australia to be a world leader when it comes to low barriers to entry and low tariffs. We're an exporting nation. We're proudly an exporting nation. Australia's become wealthy off the back of the ingenuity that's been derived from industries in Australia, but that only really works if we're exporting into markets with low barriers to entry and low tariffs. And what I'm seeing in the United States is a real challenge, not just to the global economy, but to Australia as well.
So water is a big factor in this growth to the 30 billion. We're seeing the floods in Queensland, which have been absolutely horrific. Water buybacks remain a key issue, with the federal government embarking on licence buybacks in the Murray-Darling Basin. There are a number of irrigators in this room. What comfort can you give irrigators in New South Wales that your government will defend them against local entitlements?
Yeah, look, I don't support the buybacks. I've said that in Parliament, usually after Helen's asked me a question about it. But I've come to the conclusion myself. I think different elements of the Labor Party would have a different view, but I think that there's not an understanding of what it does, not just specifically to the individual licence holder that might take an environmental buyout, but to the community, a town like Griffith, a town like Wagga, those on the different water systems. You're really speaking about the accountant, the lawyer, the other ancillary industries that exist within a regional community. And we've said it repeatedly to the Commonwealth Government. They've got to be thinking about alternatives to buybacks, because it's such a blunt instrument, and I don't think that there's an appreciation of what it does. So we've said it many times, we'll say it again. I think the Victorian government's got exactly the same view as us. They've slightly led us in relation to being an advocate, but I don't want to be left behind, and I want our position to be absolutely clear.
How do you get that message across? Because this is people's livelihoods. Water is driven by the whole business, their farming operations. How do you get that message across to the people in the city, but also your federal counterparts?
Well, it's up to you guys. I mean, I'll rely on the farm riders to put pen to paper. I mean, we've been really clear about it. But look, we can't promise unanimity in relation to policy for state and federal governments. We don't agree on every issue that comes across our desks. What I can promise you is that the New South Wales government will make its own decisions about what we think is best for our state. And it's my job to stick up for New South Wales. It just is. It's the way the federation works. If I can promise you, Queensland and Western Australia, their premiers, their governments are incredibly parochial. They've got very sharp elbows. They fight for the distribution of the GST, or they might fight in relation to water. They might look at what's happening in their areas. New South Wales has traditionally been the least parochial state, but I think we need to ensure that there's complete agreement that we've got to stick up for interests in the state, because oftentimes I feel like in the zero-sum game we miss out.
I think they like that
I've got one bloke up the back. Sorry. Thanks.
We're just going to switch it up a bit. Look, a year ago you went to Moree saying your government would step up when violent gangs were terrorising residents. You announced the juvenile crime package. Now, residents a year on in Moree, Gunnedah, Armidale, Kempsey want tougher bail laws. Do you think that we need to follow Queensland's adult crime, adult time approach?
Yeah, I mean, look, what I would say about our justice policies is a few things. Firstly, we pursued major changes to law and order in New South Wales. Tougher sentences in comparison to the previous Liberal National Government, and I can give you some examples. We introduced a tough measure in relation to repeat bail offenders for the theft of a motor vehicle or the break and enter into a home. The remand rates now under those charged with that 22C provision are now 90%. 90% are being denied bail if they're charged under that specific crime in the last Boxar data from October, September last year. The prison population is growing in New South Wales. When I was elected Premier, there was 12,500 people in prison. Today, there's 13,500 people. Now, we don't put out media releases going, good news, there's a lot more people in jail. What I would say, though, is we haven't been shy in saying if we think there needs to be a law change and we need to be stronger and send a clearer message in relation to repeat offending or those that are getting bail to keep the community safe, we're prepared to do it. And we've done it in relation to 22C, so the application for bail for those charged with the same offence who are underage. We've done it to post and boast offences because if you look at the theft of a motor vehicle for the last 10 years, the number hasn't crept up, but the proportion of people committing those offences has skewed younger. So it used to be about 1/3 of children were responsible for the theft of those motor vehicles. Now it's over half. So the aggregate hasn't changed, but there's a different group who are committing the offences. So we put in post and boast laws to say, look, we're not going to put up with people posting these reckless and dangerous behaviour on social media. We've made major changes to application of bail for those facing serious domestic violence offences, new knife laws in New South Wales, Jack's Law in New South Wales, as well as a whole range of measures that have been sometimes supported by the Coalition, sometimes not. So I think I've shown a willingness to go into communities, listen to people who have a different political background to me and say, I think we need a change here because we're sending the wrong signal. And the job's not done. I can promise you I'm not running around doing a lap of honour going, we've solved crime in New South Wales. I know it's a major issue. But I want to make sure that when we make an intervention, it in fact works. Right now, this morning I got a brief on the juvenile capacity for juvenile justice in New South Wales. We're at about 98%. And I have to make sure that when we make an intervention, it works. And if that means changes to remand and bail for repeat offenders, that's exactly what I'll do. And I think it's a level of pragmatism that has been absent for the last decade, but I'm hopeful that I can demonstrate to regional communities when we see a problem, we're prepared to act.
Thank you for that. And just before we go to a quick five, if you could be Donald Trump for the day and sign an executive order to do whatever you wanted to do, what would you do for regional New South Wales and agriculture?
Why does Donald Trump have to do it? Why can't... I'm signing an order today. We're bringing in an order. Did you see him talk about the astronaut? She's got big hair. We're going to get him out of the space station, bring him back down to Sydney. I'm signing an order today. What was the question?
What executive order would you sign for agriculture if you could do it today?
For agriculture. Good question. An executive order. Well, look, my responsibility is to provide the essential services that regional communities need. So good hospitals, good schools, good roads. And I think if I get that right, that's the basics. If we do the basics right, I've got no doubt with the level of skill and ingenuity and optimism in regional communities, they can take off. In many places, it's limited by the capacity for how many trucks can get down the road or how many teachers are in the local school, on the ability for families to stay in regional communities. So I'm a big believer in doing the things that I'm charged with well, and I think that's what I'm going to be judged on in the end. So maybe not directly answering your question, but yeah, I've got to do the basics right.
Okay, quick five. What sort of farmer do you reckon you would have been if you got the chance?
A bad one. I'm not pretending to. No, I don't have skills, and I'm from the city. I've only ever lived in Sydney, so I don't pretend to be something I'm not. But I am. I'm full of admiration for people that do it, and I think they do a great thing for the country.
Since being Premier, have there been one or two places or events you visited in New South Wales, rural New South Wales, which have stood out for any reason?
Well, I went to the Ute Muster. That was an experience with Helen. That was good fun. I love regional New South Wales. One of the best things that I get to do. If Parliament's not sitting, we would generally go somewhere in the regions. So I've gone everywhere. And I've seen some beautiful places. I think that high country, that snowy high country leading to the coast around Eden is like nothing you've ever seen. And a few times I've driven back across the Liverpool plains, and it's like something it's the most beautiful place I've ever seen.
Thank you. What's your verdict on plant-based meat burgers, yum or yuck?
Well, that's what's on the menu today, everybody, so I hope you enjoy it. No, I've never had it, so I can't comment. I don't know.
Do you reckon Penrith can win the NRL Grand Final again for a fifth year in a row? After last night, maybe not.
I certainly hope not. And but last year, Penrith's a marginal seat, everybody. So this is courage. You wanted to see courage from a politician. Last year they were in the grand final, and I backed Melbourne on radio, but I didn't realise that the microphone was on, so I got into a lot of trouble. But I don't think they can do 5 in a row. They were actually good against Melbourne in the second half. They were coming back strongly, but last night was shocking, terrible.
Thanks for that. We might go
Bulldogs' year.
We might go to a couple of questions from the floor. George?
Hi, Elizabeth Anderson from The Land. Now, you talk about wanting to help regional New South Wales, but you don't really have much of a presence out there in terms of MPs, or particularly west of the Divide. So how are you having an influence on what is happening out there?
Well, that's not my fault. We run candidates, don't we, Mick? We can't help it if no one votes for them. But look, we've got. That's a good question, and I think in some respects, because we don't have local MPs on the ground, particularly in the Central West, I have to go there a lot, and I do. I think Phil and Roy and national MPs would vouch for this as well. Helen as well. They'd vouch for me and Tara and the cabinet going out and listening firsthand. We need to do that. We know that we need to do that because there's nothing like getting first-hand experience. One of the joys, this very sincerely, and I'm not gilding the lily at all. One of the joys of my job is speaking to regional mayors. The difference between a regional mayor, a country mayor, and a city mayor, they're like from different planets. Country mayors are, I want to get industry in my town. Where do I build houses? How can I get this up and running? Forward thinking, always about progress. It's properly inspiring. Not all, but a lot of city mayors will stare at you and say, how do we effectively stop any change in my electorate? I don't want new houses, stay away. Economic development's not what they're focused on. So we've got a good network of country mayors, I think, and we speak to a lot of chambers of commerce, and hopefully I'm getting the information that I need and the government needs to make good decisions, but we can always do better.
Thanks, Premier. Simon Disney from Bendigo Agribusiness. It's well documented farmers are an ageing demographic and pathways into agriculture not necessarily easy. In recent years there have been vacancies in ag colleges in New South Wales. This is not unique to New South Wales, it's around the country, other states. Topic of conversation at AgFest. Is there any more assistance, given that some of these courses can cost 30 grand for 2 years, that state government can do to get more younger people into agribusiness, agriculture? Thank you.
I haven't, if I'll be honest with you, Simon, I haven't thought about that kind of intervention, but perhaps there's something we can look into. I do think one of the limiting factors in relation to expanding the agricultural sector is labour force and access to labour. And that's not just about the next generation coming through, that's also about making sure that farmers, when you've got a good season, can maximise their crop and then maximise whatever it is to export markets. And I know that the federal election's on at the moment, there's going to be a lot of talk about immigration. The immigration mix is going to be really important, and whoever wins the election has to take into consideration what we really have to look at, ensuring that we're not curbing our economic opportunities by saying no to people that could come to our country and be fantastic citizens and want to work on the land and want to join regional communities. Because as I've been saying, and I hope this is a message that's at least sent by me and the government, we want the agricultural sector to expand. And if there's limits to that expansion, that's a big problem for us.
Good day, Premier. Adam Kay from Cotton Australia. Thanks for being here today. And great to hear you talking about the Murray-Darling Basin Plan and your opposition to the buybacks. But at the same time, we're hearing that, and I've seen over the last 10 years these regional towns that rely on irrigation getting gutted by the buybacks. It's terrible, and to hear you say that is appreciated. But then at the same time, we've got lots of little rules-based changes that the New South Wales government's making that's reducing the reliability of irrigation for our farmers and sort of taking water back by stealth. And that's a real concern to us. So I wanted to make sure you're aware of that, because it really is concerning. We've got the buybacks on one hand, and then we've got these rule-based changes on the other hand. And when you talked about all those industries and the export dollars and the billions, a lot of that's irrigation.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And look, we would take advice, Adam. I can promise you no one's going to put up a closed door. It's a big government. Sometimes the best of intentions with government policy does get in the way of a good outcome, whether it's a good economic outcome, one that we can marry with good environmental stewardship. I am a believer that some of the best environmental stewards that we have across the state are in the ag sector, because they believe in... Yep. They believe... I don't know if it's the same person, but... No, because they believe in the intergenerational nature of agriculture and how important it is for the next generation, and they've got no interest in making sure that the land is anything other than useful, productive and available for the next generation. So look, our ears are always open.
G'day, Premier. Ben Picton from Rabobank. Interested in your comments about how New South Wales' number one export is coal, and that our trade partners are telling us that they're going to be buying less of it in the future. And also your comments on how we need to improve logistics and reduce costs for Australian farmers getting their products into international markets. I'm interested, do you support the development of a container terminal at the Port of Newcastle, and how can you make it happen?
Yeah, I mean, look, there was legislation that was moved at the end of the last parliament in relation to that. It's a complicated history, but people should know the reason there was a block on the container terminal in Newcastle is the privatisation of the ports in the state. And if there's one thing that I'm very unambiguous about, it's privatising effective government monopolies that are utilities that are needed for economic growth and opportunity are a bad idea. They just are. And that one in particular was a shocker. And unwinding these privatisations, particularly for effective monopolies, is very difficult, because the buyout clauses if you do want to introduce competition, for example, at the Port of Newcastle competing with Kembla and Botany, are very expensive. Now, that legislation's gone through. That's a good thing. I think the marketplace will look now at capital and financing for just that kind of change. But I do think it's a warning for governments. It's very tempting, particularly when budgets are tight, to flog off the family jewels in the view that it'll make the state balance sheet look better. 10 years down the line, guess who bears the price or the costs? It's usually industry. It's usually businesses that rely on those basic but important government services. So, I knew it hasn't been a good deal for the state, and we've really got to watch those kind of transactions, because when you've got export-led industries like agriculture, they've got to get to markets around the world, and the only way to do that's across a port.
Well, thank you for that, Premier. I'll just pass it over to Ben. That's our questions for today. So thank you very much. Quick 90 seconds, what you thought about what the Premier just said.
Thanks very much. Look, I think there's a couple of really important points there. The first is, as a regional journalist of long standing, I love Farm Writers Association and everything that you do. Terrific to hear the Premier say that recognise the importance of regional media, but it's got to be supported as well. Secondly, I'm from the Monero. Lovely to hear him talk about that beautiful part of the world. Biosecurity, as it is for so many of you, such an important issue. Again, investment, the research and development, it's great words, but we've got to make sure that we back that with action. And terrific questions, Sam, about regional crime. Nationals Liberals have just introduced a regional crime bill as of today, second reading in Parliament, and we hope that Labor and the Greens support that.
It would not surprise any of you that I disagree strongly, and from my side of politics, with his government's priorities. And look, there are a number of challenges for this state, and that has come on the back of what we did during COVID to try to get us all through COVID. And every state, every country is like it, spending our way through, trying to get the state through it, and then afterwards trying to inject the economy, get it up, get it going. And we're seeing huge inflation come after that, serious challenges, in that. And so now, where we are is a state with a huge debt burden, and that is something that we have. Every state in Australia has. The national government has the same. So it's a time, and everyone in this place is involved in agribusiness in some way. And when you're seeing your inputs costs go up, fertiliser, power bills, insurance bills, you start going through the line by line. You're looking at where you can cut costs. And they are hard decisions that the Premier's having to make at the moment. So, but where I think he's getting it wrong is this is a time to look at where does this state make its money. And he said it. It's from our export industries. It's from agriculture. And so that's where we need to be investing our money. It needs to be investing in our infrastructure to make those export industries stronger. But what I see is not that. I don't see the investment in our regional areas. I've seen the Regional Development Department being axed. I've seen money being pulled out of DPI. I've seen in my portfolio regional roads. So the Regional Road Fund, 87% of it went into Labor seats. So none of it went past the divide. It's all on the coast. These are the things. This is not a time to be spending money flippantly. We need to be spending it on infrastructure that earns this state more money and strengthening its economy.
Chris has got a very good general knowledge across the state, but I think what has been falling short is the issue of water. He's talking about agriculture taking up the slack when coal is limited with exports or starts to be limited. And I have met with Chris Minns time and time again talking about water. Every question in the last 2 years to him in question time, when I ask, is about water. And the importance of that. He talks a big game. I'd like to see some action, some real action. And what I'm putting to Chris Minns now is that the state government owns over 770 gigalitres of water. The federal government, of course, are wanting to buy back water. I'm suggesting that the state government sell our portion or our commitment to that plan. Victoria would have to do the same, and wipe that out instead of taking water from our communities. And that would generate about $3.5 billion that would be spent in the regions. And that could be spent on R&D, it could be spent on our roads, it could be spent on digital connectivity, all these things that we are crying out for. So I guess, I'll be putting the pressure on him, but I'm asking all of you, the media, to do exactly the same thing, because 85% of the New South Wales food comes from my electorate, and irrigation does matter. Irrigation is what will create the wealth for the state, and there needs to be that recognition. So my final comment is make Murray great.
Can I just say the water buyback position People just need to take note of that. State jurisdictions are actually taking it up to the federal government around water buybacks. Chris has made it very clear today that the New South Wales government does not support the water buyback process, that it is actually a very blunt instrument and it affects regional communities. And can I also say, in the water space, when Chris became the Shadow Minister for Water, we took him out west on a number of occasions, and he really did take the time to listen and learn about regional communities and the impact of water, or the importance of water, on those communities. I'm no longer an MP, so I don't have to worry about speaking for 90 seconds, Sam, because I was in the upper house where we had untimed debates, but that's no longer the case.
A few of the things I'd like to see more of a focus on, and he did mention the biosecurity at a very high level, and he talked about the pig program, for instance, but these one-off injections into biosecurity are not shifting the needle. We're not making a difference in our pig control. So we need to see, with pigs, with Aricia cactus, with carp, some long-term strategic and targeted funding. He didn't mention the emergency recovery stuff, which I thought was a little bit disappointing, being our farmers are the front line on that. Our farmers are the ones that are copping the bulk of our natural disasters at the moment, and we're looking up at the Northern Rivers, I know the farmers up there are waiting to hear some announcement on Category C funding that they'd love to hear quickly, knowing that we're about to go into caretaker mode from a federal regards. Innovation is going to be a big one. We need to be looking how we're farming in 10, 15 years' time and investing in that innovation and make it easier to foster and implement that innovation. He did touch on attracting people to ag, and I think that's a great thing that we need to be doing. Farming is not just blokes driving tractors anymore. It's so much more than that. And you look around the room, people here in suits that are all in agriculture. And we need to be promoting that, and we need to be promoting that in the cities. And I enjoyed Simon's question up the end there as well about our ag degrees, our ag courses. Having done one of them myself at Hawkesbury Ag College a few years ago, we need to get more kids into agriculture. And not just country kids, city kids as well, who we need to show them that there's a real life in that. And one of the big things that I need to, that I want to see us promote is our regional vibrancy. It is very much linked to agriculture, how well our regional communities are going. We need to get our schools humming, our hospitals going well, and right down to supporting our little clubs, our cricket club, our crochet clubs in our towns, because that's what makes our regional communities sing, and we need to support them really well.
So the problem that my farmers are facing is the cost of water delivery. Government charges are increasing that cost. We're having a shrinking irrigator pool and productive pool, which is also impacting on our ability to produce the food that you eat every day. So what I would just say to you is to all put some pressure on. We need to keep water in the productive pool. Irrigation also has environmental benefits. So if you're being sold the lie that the Basin Plan is is supporting the environment, our farmers are the real environmentalists in that argument. So I had a question for Minns because I just wanted to let you all know that our farmers are facing a 184% increase in government charges to deliver water over the next 5 years. Imagine if that was you in your business and whether or not you'd be able to survive that. So we've got a million problems, and yes, agriculture and irrigated agriculture can help drive our nation and our country state forward, but we need to have our farmers with a profitable model so that they can actually grow the food that you eat. Thanks.
I thought the Premier was fantastic in his presentation. The best Premier we've ever seen in New South Wales. But genuinely, he really does understand, and the government really does understand the needs of this space. And we are, I've had the opportunity to speak at your events a number of times. And to hear directly from you, and as the Premier said, we both like to get out to engage with people across the sector as much as possible so that we can, and we are, listening to what you need, putting plans in place and investment in place where it's needed, where we can support you to grow the sector, to get to that $30 billion mark, support growth in our exports, make sure that you can be the successes that you certainly want to be, and get out of the way when that's required. So all of the feedback that we get, all of the ideas that we get from the sector, taken very seriously at the heart of government. The Premier gets it. We're all on your side, and we're certainly committed to working with you to have every possible success as an industry into the future.